how do I want to solve it? Does it require a smart person? Does it require a smart person that just doesn't work for us? Or does it warrant a smart AI for that particular purpose? And the post that I did recently used Poe, which is basically just a bot platform. You can feed the context into multiple bots. So the one I created was an Excel formula bot. Wasn't perfect, but it was good for a use case. But you could then have, financial benchmarking bot. You could have financial decision sounding board bot. Do you see what I mean? And then immediately you've got 3 tabs up in your browser whereby as soon as you've got a task to carry out and a problem to solve, you can just go to the bot that's trained for that use case.
So if we try to zoom in a bit more on the artificial intelligence piece, I mean, how do you see this impacting or already have impacted the finance function? Can you give maybe a few examples of how you see it?
Yeah, so if we maybe go back a few years to AI before generative AI, everybody used to talk about algorithms, so we can connect our data to a machine learning algorithm and we can do all of this cool predictive stuff, right? And that's not new. A lot of businesses haven't even got to that level of predictive analytics yet. A, because they don't have enough data to feed it, or B, just because, they're struggling to find use cases, which always comes back to, you've got a problem to solve for. So my feeling is that with some of the AI we've seen before is that a lot of people don't know about the capability, or it's been difficult to implement, or they've just not found the use case for it because they can use Excel to do a bit of modeling, or they can use a dedicated FP&A tool, which could have some sort of, machine learning algorithm built into it. So in terms of that, older AI adoption rates were, I guess, pretty low, unless you were kind of like an enterprise organization that had a dedicated data team, dedicated IT team supporting that and all that sort of thing. But with all technologies, we see a shift whereby that tool becomes more accessible to smaller businesses and more people. And that's what we're seeing at the moment, because obviously ChatGPT is accessible to everyone, right? But with, I guess, an ERP slant, before generative AI, there was still an element of AI that was being built into some tools. So we look at Power BI, had the data Q&A, which was basic when it was first released, but you could use text to say, produce me a chart, that follows these parameters, or find me this data, so you could Q&A using text there. So that's not new. Embedded in ERPs, I mentioned the Dynamics example, whereby you could, scrape the text off an email and get Dynamics to create an order for you. So again, that's an AI use case specifically for finance. And I always remember, again, and this was coming back to the demos, right? The mind blown moment was somebody emailing me saying, can I have an update on this invoice? And then being able to click on the invoice number and have it take you straight to the invoice in the ERP. To me, that was a game changer. I absolutely loved that. And it helped me sell a lot of software. And then more recently, we've got more advanced AI that's built into the server infrastructure of some of these multi-tenant tools. And we don't need to get into the technical side of things, but if you are on a cloud solution that has automatic updates, chances are that's on a large server infrastructure, either like Microsoft Azure or Amazon Web Services, or fill in the gaps. But this enables software vendors to enable AI within that base database. So whether it's Sage, Oracle, Dynamics, or whatever it happens to be, you've got the ability to start building in these algorithms to the core data. So one example would be we're doing in Sage space. So there's a GL outlier detection. And all it is an algorithm that trawls through historic data when it comes to month end, and you need to do, those corrections that are a pain because you're trawling through loads of data to check that everything matches up. Outliers will just, pinpoint the anomaly and say, look, this requires your attention. You can forget about the rest because they look okay. So that's a real life use case. Tarek Munir, who's one of the senior finance guys, you've probably seen him on LinkedIn, PepsiCo, had him on the podcast. When he was delving into data science and doing all of his sort of Python and AI training back in the day, he effectively emulated that himself manually before it started being built into all of these tools. So he actually built his own GL outlier detector, which I was really impressed with. So check him out if you've got the time. And then obviously moving further forwards, you've now got generative AI. And for me, this is where everything changes, because instead of being reliant on a business to use AI, i.e. the only way I can use AI is if I either have developer knowledge or I've got it built into the tools that I use every day, I can now have an individual AI that's working on my behalf. Yeah. Again, data protection, anonymize your data. I'll always say that sort of stuff. But to be able to have something like ChatGPT open in a tab for you to just, essentially use it as a finance assistant to ask questions or to validate formulas or to produce VBA code or whatever, that sort of stuff, it immediately makes it more accessible to the individual, not just the business. And that's what I'm seeing more and more of, is not just the adoption from a business perspective, but people at an individual level to now be able to say, right, I have this issue that I want help with, or this is something that personally I want to speed up. I now have the tools available. So a long answer to a short question, but hopefully that answers it for you.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. And I think, what I've been saying for a while is because I see a lot of, for instance, finance professionals that want to learn to code and really build stuff themselves, could be the simple stuff of SQL, just be able to query and get some numbers from a database. But I'm like, why invest in actually developing these skills for yourself when we know that the low code, no code movement is going to build these apps and tools for us? Then, ChatGPT is okay, it's probably pushing limits, saying it's a simple example, but if you look at the user interface, it's extremely simple, right? And you can just write some queries, and you could probably have built something if you were a coding master that could scrape off of Google or whatever, and then give you something similar. But why invest in developing these skills yourself unless you really want to be a tech expert? Of course, then you should. But if you're in finance, I just don't see the idea or the benefit, because these tools, they're coming our way and they'll be coming faster than you can build them yourself. And because it's the best experts in the world building them, then you just can't beat it. So I'm really just trying to encourage finance professionals to say, forget about learning all the coding. I mean, yeah, sure, you will probably get some benefits out of it, especially in the short term, but in the long run, I don't think it's going to get the benefits that you actually have to put in terms of time and resources to actually learn this stuff. That's just my personal opinion, but I'm hearing you sort of at least swaying in that direction. Maybe I'm taking words out of your mouth. I don't know, but you spoke a bit about the generative AI, of course, which is definitely one of the hot buzzwords today. You mentioned a little bit about it. Can you try to be a bit more specific in terms of how you see finance professionals using this to their advantage?
Yeah. So the quickest wins are sort of general admin that involves anything text based. And that's what we've got to bear in mind. Originally, when these large language models were released, they wouldn't allow us to produce visualizations or connect to other apps or do anything like that. So it was very isolated. But if you wanted to write a document, so, write me a job spec for a financial controller, you've got your baseline within seconds. Yeah. If you are doing a report to senior management, give me a framework for a one-page summary based on this context, segmented into whatever, and then you've got your structure. So that's one area, more relating to text-based or supporting maybe presentations that you're putting together. So that's one thing that I saw originally before we had the latest iteration with the likes of Code Interpreter and some of the plugins, right? Fast forward a little bit when you start moving into more of the FP&A stuff. And Glenn Hopper, check him out. He's the AI and finance master. I had him on the podcast. He first created his own FP&A tool with ChatGPT pre-plugins and Code Interpreter. Yeah, and he did that with the massive brain that he has, just by taking the excerpts of code that it spat out and obviously using his own development tools to put it all together. But now with plugins, you could connect ChatGPT to Notable, which is a tool that I'd recommend. Similar to Google Colab, it's a Jupyter notebook, but you can use ChatGPT to give Notable instructions. So very simply, you upload your data to Notable, again, anonymized. Notable is probably a bit more secure than just uploading to ChatGPT, so it's at least a level up. And then you can use ChatGPT to tell Notable what you want to do with the data. And this is when we go from simple text into visualizations. So one of the posts that I did, inspired by Glenn, was, how I created my own FP&A tool in whatever the time frame it took me to do, is I essentially scraped a load of data from finance system, anonymized. So I think it was just purchase ledger, so it was just months and months worth of transactional information. I uploaded it by CSV, and then I used ChatGPT to do a couple of bits. So, produce me some visuals based on supplier spend, so essentially who am I, paying the most money from my suppliers. So it's simple stuff, right? You can do it in Power BI, even in, sort of a pivot chart in Excel, all that sort of stuff. So that's not particularly groundbreaking. But then being able to ask ChatGPT, what would you recommend to visualize this data? And this is the biggest win that I've found, is because we, with our experience and our knowledge of Excel or whatever it happens to be, we only know what we know.
Yep.
Yeah. And unless we're best friends with a data analyst that we can just call up and say, oh, I've got this data, would you recommend, a scatter graph or, whatever it happens to be, you can just say, what are some of the best visual mechanisms for visualizing this data? And it'll come back with suggestions. But it's so quick, you can try. You get the preview of the visualization, you just keep going until you get the output that you want. So in terms of speed of being able to produce those visualizations, we're not into faffing with data anymore. The tools will sanitize and pick up the data that's relevant to the visualization for you. So your thought process immediately is just to what's the output that I want to produce. So that was a really good scenario. But coming back to what I mentioned earlier, when we talk about more traditional AI models where you've got machine learning algorithms where you can then do the future focused stuff, I also then went on to saying, right, well, forgetting about data that exists from the history you've got, can you give me a prediction of the next 12 months as to how you think that spend is likely to change? And again, my data wasn't anywhere near rich enough to produce any sort of decent output. But for illustrative purposes, it went really well because, again, you didn't have to have, a clever modeling tool. You could literally just get a benchmark of, right, well, this is what a reasonably smart algorithm is saying could be our supplier spend in the coming 12 months. And that was all done with ChatGPT tied to Notable. Of course, you can now do it with Code Interpreter, but the disadvantage of Code Interpreter is it's static data. Something like Notable, you could actually feed in live data from, SQL database or wherever you've got that data housed, like a Snowflake for a data warehouse. Interpreter, you'll achieve the same ends. You don't have quite as much power, but you still got some really quick wins in that scenario as well. So that's on, I guess, the data and the visualization side of things. Now we're getting to the point where we can actually set context with these tools. Yeah. And that was the biggest gap. So when you look at my guides and my Spices framework, the two first elements of the prompts that I've always instruct people to use is scenario and what was the persona is what it was. Yeah. So the scenario is feed the large language model, the context of the query, so you are working as a data analyst with a view of, generating some supply spend analysis, whatever happens. And then the persona is you're a financial controller and you were tasked with all of this, that, and the other. Now, with ChatGPT custom instructions and some of the other bot platforms that are available, you can preset all of that. So you don't have to be anywhere near as advanced with your prompts. And I think we are going to see iterations of that coming, whereby we're not going to have to think so much about the context because we're going to have all of these different bots that are geared up for these specific narrow AI use cases, whereby you can just pick a bot for a certain purpose. And I do generally believe, and I haven't trademarked the term yet, but obviously insourcing is when we use the resource that we have of our employees, smart people that we want to make sure are shunted towards the high value production end of their day to day, right? You've got outsourcing, using platforms like Upwork to find people to do stuff. For me, a good use case for likes of Upwork is more the creative stuff, because I still think some of the generative AI for visualizations, especially when it comes to that graphic design piece, is a bit lacking. But I think we're then going to have the concept of AI sourcing. And again, I haven't trademarked it yet, but people will come to a decision where they say, I've got this problem. How do I want to solve it? Does it require a smart person? Does it require a smart person that just doesn't work for us? Or does it warrant a smart AI for that particular purpose? And the post that I did recently used Poe, which is basically just a bot platform. You can feed the context into multiple bots. So the one I created was an Excel formula bot. Wasn't perfect, but it was good for a use case. But you could then have, financial benchmarking bot. You could have financial decision sounding board bot. Do you see what I mean? And then immediately you've got 3 tabs up in your browser, whereby as soon as you've got a task to carry out and a problem to solve, you can just go to the bot that's trained for that use case. And that's where I see the market moving, whether it's one that you train yourself or whether it's an off the shelf low code platform that you can adopt. So again, a long answer to a short question, but hopefully that helps.
No, the passion is shining through, and I'm really loving this, Adam. I said in the beginning, I hope to learn something, and I'm definitely already learning a lot here and sparking a lot of ideas. Of course, today I'm also responsible for sales and marketing in our company, and we have, for instance, sales pipeline data going back to 2019, and then you compare that with your revenue data, and then you can say, okay, upload those two things and say, based on the development in the pipeline and how it usually translates into revenue, what's going to be our budget for next year? I mean. It should be better than we consider, just say this, it should be XYZ, right?
100%. And just on the data anonymization piece, and we'll go on a bit of a sales tangent now, I hope you don't mind. But obviously, as part of my day job, I oversee sort of sales process at my company as well. And we use HubSpot, and
Yeah,
I'm sure it'd be the same for a lot of other systems, right?
we do too.
Yeah, good. So yeah, you'll definitely learn something here. So when you export data from HubSpot, what you get is alongside, if it's an individual first name, last name, email, and so on and so forth, is you get a record ID. Yeah. So if you're wanting to feed data into a ChatGPT or a Notable or whatever it happens to be, you can export that data. You can get rid of the first name, last name, and email address. You've still got the record ID. Yeah. And then you've got the non-sensitive data that could be stuff like, industry, persona, do they work in finance, operations, or whatever it happens to be. If you feed that anonymized data into a large language model to get your predictions, you can say stuff like, find me the record ID that this points towards. Yeah. So even though you've taken the individual information out of the data, you can always find it because you've got the original for the record ID. So that's a way that you can tie it back by actually being able to find stuff that's relevant to a customer or an individual contact without having to put their data into a large language model. So yeah, we can pick that up offline if you want me to how to do that. But I did just that. So we've got a team. Obviously, we make calls and we send emails and that sort of stuff. And some of the richest data that you'll get from a CRM system is stuff like call and email data because the volumes are higher, right? People can be making 50, 100 calls a day or sending 50, 100 emails a day. So before I did the finance use case on Notable, I did the sales use case. And the problem to solve was we don't know that we're contacting people at the right time. Are we wasting 80% of our time on the phone just because people aren't available to speak to us? So using Notable, I analyzed the call data and I found what times of day the pickup rates were best. And then we optimized our process around those times and our levels of connections went up. Yeah, so that's a real life use case of how that could be used. And it also means that you're then less reliant on industry benchmarks because the default previously would be Google, tell me what a good connection rate would be, or tell me what the best times people pick up the phone are. But it's totally company specific. You can't apply a generalization to your specific business in your specific industry. You've got the data, just use it. And then we've got the tools that enable us to do it better.
It's very fascinating and very, very exciting, I would say. But maybe I'm the only one that thinks that, or maybe you do as well, Aaron, thinks it's exciting. So if you kind of were to give a black and white answer, would you say that finance professionals should fear for or be excited about the future of the finance function, considering everything that AI can do and technology in general?
That is a really difficult question.
Is that black and white?
So I'm a bit scared personally, but then again, it's because I'm on the bleeding edge and I see a lot of stuff that other people don't. The black and white answer will be parts of jobs will be replaced guaranteed, but for good people, there will always be a good job, and I always go back to, and people have told me it a couple of times, but nobody has ever complained about having more time,
Exactly.
and that's what I hang my hat on. So yes, jobs will be replaced if you're just keying invoices. Guaranteed jobs are already being replaced with the technology that we've got already for people that are just keying invoices. I think for knowledge workers, we will see more of our jobs replaced. So we've just got to think about what are the things that we can do as people that AI can't.
Yeah, no, I saw this. I heard this stat that it was gonna, let's say, destroy 70 million jobs, but it was gonna create 90 million jobs, right? So the net is a gain, but obviously, if you don't move, upskill, reskill within that space, then of course it's a net negative for you. But the potential of moving is there, and that's at least why I'm excited for the future of the finance function, even though it's not going to be easy. I mean, we deal with the human element of change every single day, and we're trying to push these finance professionals in the more, let's say, human, people-oriented direction. And it's hard, right? It's hard because, and I ran a poll on LinkedIn on this some 2 years back or so. I asked, well, why did you go into finance in the first place? Was it because you like numbers or work with business or work with people? And to no surprise, only 10% said because I like to work with people. But today, because the transactional stuff is almost automated, and then soon, the forecast and the budget will be automated, right? And then what's left is that human-to-human interaction where you're talking about how can we make things happen and following up with the execution teams, how is it going? What are we learning? And then feeding that back. that's what the finance role is today. But and I've gone through this change journey myself. It took me 10 years to change and become good at it. And today, of course, I'm not really in finance as per se anymore. But if you had told me just 5 years ago, hey Anders, in 5 years you're going to be sales and marketing responsible for a consulting company, I would have said no way in hell, right? But that's the kind of move or upskill readiness that we need to have. Maybe not as extreme, but certainly think about, hey, okay, this is going to come. It's going to take in full or part of my job. What am I excited about? What am I passionate about? And how can I use that to take a next step to really still be relevant, I would say, right? I think that's to me is really key. But we're coming up towards the end, Adam, here. So, just a final question before I'll say some famous final words if you have. Do you think there's going to be a time where AI has completely replaced the need for people in the finance function?
In some industries, yes. In others, no. And that's probably the best answer I can give. I think in those smaller businesses, for example, and we're seeing sort of the emergence of a fractional CFO, right? The complexity of the business probably doesn't warrant a really big finance team. In which case, some of the tools that we're seeing being developed will act as virtual CFOs. And then you might have a fractional CFO that's a human with experience that then supports that exercise, right? But I think more businesses are going to be able to self-serve from a finance perspective, and especially in non-complex businesses, right? I think for more complex businesses that have more moving parts, I don't think finance is ever going to be replaced. I think there's too much expertise that we've gained as humans, and there's, too much for, at least at the moment, an AI to comprehend. But who knows? It's always funny, late at night I ponder this, can we imagine a world where, we're the tools, and the AI is the director or the owner of the business or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah.
And, we giggle about it a little bit, but I think these are thought experiments we need to have. I think the question that everybody is going to need to ask themselves, not just in finance, but all over the place, is what does it mean to be human? Yeah. And I think we're still working it out.
Yeah.
But I think if we can nail that down and then set that in a finance context, and I know you're doing work about, CFO 5.0 and all that sort of stuff. I think if we can nail down what it means to be human and have technology support that, I think we're onto a winner.
Yeah, it's a big question, Irene, but at least my simple point is that, tech plus human equals more than tech or human alone, right?
Yes,
so
correct.
And I think for any foreseeable future, that's going to be the case. You can talk about 100 years in the future, but no one knows what's going to happen there anyway. So let's focus on, the next 5-10 years, and then, make our sort of take a stand within that period at least. But then any final word of advice you'll give to all the finance professionals tuning in here from a technology perspective and how they can get the most out of it?
Yeah, I mean, coming back to that future focus, I think, humans are wired for anxiety, myself included, right? I feel like often my default state is anxious, right? And every day I'm having to train myself just to think about, what can I do now? What will I enjoy now? And just focus more on that. So I think one bit of advice is to not try and place yourself too much into the future, because if you worry too much, it'll affect your ability to make decisions in the moment, right? So that's one bit of advice. When it comes to AI, or maybe just technology in general, just keep an open mind. And in the recent podcast I did with Paul and Sloan on FP&A today, we kind of echoed the point: have a play, have a look at my content, have a look at other people's content, Nicola, Christian Martinez, all of that sort of stuff. Find a tool that's really accessible, low risk, and just have a play, whether it's document Q&A, whether it's some of the, more elaborate data stuff that we've been talking about today, and maybe spend half an hour a week on it, and the more that you have a look, the more you'll understand it's more exciting than scary at the moment. It will become more scary if you place yourself in 5 years' time. But for now, find something that's easy to use and just get going with it.
I think that's really sound advice, Adam. And thanks so much for being on the show here on the podcast. I think I learned something. I got some inspiration for things that we could probably do in our company. And I've been experimenting with ChatGPT for the past 3-4 months, and it's definitely supercharged my productivity to a level that I would never have been able to do on my own. And that's just one out of a million tools, right? So I fully echo that. test it out and get some learnings and then figure out how to use from there. Thanks so much, Adam. I really, truly do appreciate it. And I'm sure the listeners will too. So if you don't know Adam already, go follow Adam Shelton on LinkedIn. Lots of great content coming out there every day on the tech and finance piece. And I'm definitely a follower and I'm also learning something every day. So Adam, thanks a lot. And see you out there.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Anders. I really appreciate it. And again, for the early stage support, you guys were there from the very beginning. So I'll be forever grateful. So yeah, thanks again.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.